If you can still smell your mother's perfume before you even remember her face, this video is for you. By the end, you'll understand exactly why the scent from an old bottle can do something no photograph ever could. And you'll discover which of these forgotten perfumes you can still buy today, whether it's the original or the closest modern equivalent. I started researching this after finding one of my mother's empty perfume bottles in a drawer I hadn't opened in 4 years. The moment I took off the cap, it nearly brought me to my knees. But one perfume on this list has such an unexpected story that I could hardly believe it when I uncovered it. And I promise, when we get to it, you'll understand your mother a little differently than you do now. If you lived through the 1950s, you're one of my girls. Subscribe, give this video a like, and join us. This is where we keep these memories alive.
Now here's what I found, and I think you'll feel this one before I even finish saying it.
Smell doesn't work like your other senses. A photograph goes in through your eyes first, it gets sorted, it gets filed. A smell skips all of that. It goes straight to the part of you that holds feeling and memory together, with nothing standing in between. That's the whole reason one spray off an old bottle can undo you in half a second, while a whole stack of photographs in a drawer just sits there, quiet. There's actually a name for this. Scientists call it the Proust effect, after a writer who once took a bite of a cookie and was pulled straight back into his childhood, whole and complete. It's the same thing happening with that perfume. The smell doesn't remind you of your mother. For 1 second, it puts her back in the room. I have to be honest with you. Nobody selling perfume today wants you thinking about that. They sell fragrance the way they sell a handbag. Something for the season. Something you swap out before it goes out of style. But your heart never agreed to that. It still holds on to one scent the same way it holds on to her voice, her handwriting, the sound of her walking through the kitchen before supper. And that's really what we're talking about here. A woman who wore one perfume for 40 years wasn't being plain or old-fashioned or stuck in her ways. She was leaving something behind her children would recognize in the dark, years after she was gone. That's not habit, girls. That's how a woman stays in the room, even after she's left it. There's a comment sitting underneath one of these old perfume videos with more replies than almost anything else I've read. And it's not complicated at all. A woman wrote, "After 60 years, I still wear Shalimar by Guerlain." No story attached. She didn't think she needed one.
Let me show you something about why that bottle earned that kind of loyalty.
Guerlain built Shalimar back in 1925 around an ingredient nobody else in perfume had used before. Real vanilla, back then, was pulled by hand from orchids in Madagascar, pollinated one flower at a time because the plant has no natural pollinator there, one of the most labor-heavy crops on Earth, and far too costly to put much of into a bottle of perfume. So Guerlain's chemists made their own, in a lab, and gave Shalimar a warmth and depth no flower could reach alone. It didn't smell like a garden. It didn't smell like soap. It smelled like something warm and a little private. Once a woman put it on, it stopped smelling like a bottle. It started smelling like her.
One woman in the comments said she's worn Shalimar since 1966. 60 years on one bottle, for those of you doing the math along with me. And she said her daughters have told her plainly, more than once, when she's gone, that smell is what's going to bring her back. Not a photograph on the mantle, that bottle on her dresser. You already know which bottle that was. In your own house. I don't even have to ask. Not every perfume doing this kind of work costs a fortune either. There's the little blue bottle shaped like the Eiffel Tower I mentioned earlier, Evening in Paris, less than $1 at Woolworth's. But here's what didn't make it into the first telling. That bottle was rarely something a woman bought for herself. More often, it was a daughter's Christmas present, paid for with babysitting money or a few dollars saved out of an allowance, wrapped in whatever paper was left in the closet, sitting under the tree with her name spelled out in a child's handwriting. It wasn't vanity sitting on that dresser. It was a child trying to give her mother something nice, for once, with money she'd earned herself. And who remembers Jean Naté? That's it. That's the whole question. No history, no mechanism. Some of you just felt something land, and that's exactly what that name is supposed to do. Because here's what nobody tells you about white shoulders.
During the Second World War, when buying American actually meant something, a company called Evian made sure every part of it, the formula, the design, the bottling, happened on home soil, at a time when French perfume was still the standard everyone else measured against. Maybe that's part of why it ended up in so many medicine cabinets at once. Grandmother wore it, mother wore it, the aunts wore it to every holiday dinner, every funeral, every wedding. 3 generations of women walking into the same room carrying the exact same scent. So that smelling white shoulders today doesn't call up one woman, it calls up all of them, standing in the kitchen together.
That's the real difference between then and now, girls, and it's a quiet one. Today we change perfume with the seasons, one for spring, one for the holidays, a new one every time a magazine decides our old one is dated. And if you've switched a dozen times over the years without ever quite meaning to, that's not a mistake you made on your own. That's a habit the industry spent decades building into you on purpose. Back then, a woman chose one scent, and it didn't sit on a shelf for long. It became how people knew she was in the room before she ever said a word.
And here's the part that surprised me most, going through all of this. Almost every name on this list still exists somewhere today. Sometimes under the exact same label. Sometimes quietly reformulated under a different bottle. Sometimes sitting on a shelf in a vintage shop 2 states over, waiting for someone who has no idea what they actually found. Well, here's something I didn't have room to cover in this video. While researching these forgotten perfumes, I ended up uncovering dozens of vintage fragrances, the stories behind them, the women who wore them, and which ones you can still find today. I organized everything into a simple guide so you can explore it at your own pace. Just open the pinned comment below this video and you'll find the link waiting for you. I think you're going to enjoy what's inside. Now, I have to be honest with you about one of these, because if I don't, I'm not being straight with you about who our mothers actually were.
Taboo, made by Dana back in 1932, didn't start out trying to be sweet. The perfumer, a man named Jean Carles, was given a very specific assignment: build something for a woman with a certain kind of reputation. He built it anyway. Heavy, dark, a little dangerous smelling on purpose. And it sold, and sold, and kept selling for decades. Plenty of women who would never have described themselves that way put it on regardless, in the privacy of their own bedroom, before church, before bridge club, before anything at all. Your mother might have been one of them. That doesn't take anything away from her. If anything, it adds something back. She wasn't only the woman who taught you to fold a fitted sheet and stretch a pot roast for 3 days. She was also a woman who liked feeling a little dangerous once in a while and never once apologized for it out loud. Now, up until the early 1950s, perfume mostly arrived as a gift, not a purchase. A husband bought it for an anniversary. A son brought it home from somewhere far away. A woman simply didn't walk into a store and buy fragrance for herself. That wasn't how the custom worked, and nobody questioned it. Then in 1953, Estee Lauder did something almost nobody had asked for. She made a bath oil that doubled as a perfume, priced low enough and packaged plainly enough that a woman could buy it herself without waiting on anyone to give it to her. She called it Youth Dew. It wasn't really about youth at all. It was about a woman deciding for the first time on a wide scale that she didn't need anyone's permission to smell like something. Bluegrass, from Elizabeth Arden, tells a quieter version of that same story. And for a lot of households, it usually came through the front door, not a department store counter. In the early 1950s, Avon's sales force nearly quadrupled because more women than ever wanted a little income that didn't pull them away from the house. Territories got smaller so more representatives could work them. By 1954, Ding Dong Avon Calling was already running on television, and the Avon lady ringing your doorbell was about as ordinary as the mail. For a young wife with almost nothing left over by the end of the week, a bottle of Bluegrass off that catalog wasn't a luxury she couldn't justify. It was proof that a few careful dollars could still make her feel like herself. Price never decided whether a woman felt elegant. It never has.
I spent good money learning this next part, and I mean that almost literally. Hours chasing down documents that were never written for anyone outside a chemistry lab. Here's what I found. Almost every one of these classic scents, Shalimar, Taboo, plenty of others, built part of their depth on something called oak moss. It's what gave those old perfumes that low, mossy base sitting underneath everything else. Starting around 2017, European regulators began restricting it, and by August of 2019, no new product containing it past certain limits could even enter the market. By 2021, products already sitting on store shelves had to be pulled entirely. The reason wasn't fashion, and it wasn't anyone deciding the smell had gone out of style. Oak moss contains two compounds, atronol and chloroatronol, capable of causing real allergic reactions in a small percentage of the people who wear it. Somewhere between 1 and 3 people out of every 100.
That's not nothing once you're selling to millions of women.
Independent perfumers were furious about it, by the way. One of them put it plainly, in a slogan that made the rounds afterward: "Bureaucracy destroys art." I'm not sure I'd have chosen those exact words, but I understood the feeling behind them the moment I read it. So when you spray a bottle of Shalimar today, and it doesn't quite land the same way it used to, your nose isn't lying to you, and neither is your memory. Nobody sat in a boardroom and decided the original was inferior. A regulatory board, on the other side of an ocean, decided it was safer to remove a couple of molecules, and once they did, every company selling internationally had to follow along. Your mother wasn't wrong about that smell. She was right about it for 40 years, wearing a formula nobody had touched yet.
And I think you already know this, actually.
Somewhere underneath it, you suspected the change was never really about her or about you. It almost never is. To be honest, I didn't expect that answer either. If this is the first time anyone's explained it to you this plainly, pass it along to the next person who needs to hear it too. Now, you probably have a cousin Linda somewhere in your family. Every family's got one. Linda, who owned 40-some perfumes by 1975, one for every mood, every outfit, every man she was trying to impress that particular month. I say that with real affection. Linda was fun. Linda smelled like 5 different decades depending on the day, and never once apologized for it. But Linda was also the first one buying a new bottle the second some magazine decided her old one was finished.
Here's who told her that, by the way.
Mr. Marketing. The same fellow who eventually convinced all of us that one perfume worn for 30 years meant a woman had stopped trying, instead of meaning she'd already finished the search the rest of us were still on. He doesn't make a dime off a woman who's done shopping. So somewhere along the way, done got quietly rebranded as a problem that needed fixing. My mother never worried about any of this. She had her bottle. She wasn't wearing it because she lacked other options sitting on a shelf somewhere. She was wearing it because she already knew herself. And knowing yourself doesn't need updating every season, no matter what the new catalog says. Girls, if you're still wearing what you started wearing back in 1974, you were never behind. You were just done early, and somebody's been trying to sell you out of it ever since. So here's the practical part of all this, and I think it's going to surprise you a little.
Shalimar, White Shoulders, Bluegrass, Taboo. Every one of them is still sitting on a shelf somewhere right now, today, in 2026. None of them were pulled. They were quietly rewritten, the way I explained earlier, a few molecules removed for allergy safety, the formula adjusted to satisfy a regulation written an ocean away. They didn't disappear. They got edited. Evening in Paris is the real exception here, and I want to be honest about that too.
Bourgeois stopped making it in 1969, for good. And the question under almost every comment about that little blue bottle isn't whether it worked. Everyone already agrees it worked. The real question is always some version of, why did they stop making it? And the honest answer is the dullest one there is. It stopped selling enough to justify the line. The same way plenty of perfectly good things quietly get discontinued once the accountants take a look. Nobody decided it had gone bad. They decided it had stopped being profitable. And that's a very different sentence. But here's the part nobody tells you. You can still find that same sensory signature, that powdery, old-world floral feeling, sitting inside other bottles that never went anywhere. 4711 cologne is still made today the same way it's been made for over 200 years, and it carries some of that same powdery, citrus-forward character. So does Jean Naté, still right there on the shelf, still recognizable the second the cap comes off. And you don't need to hunt through some dusty antique shop to find any of this, though that's part of the fun if you want it. Shalimar, White Shoulders, and Bluegrass are sitting in the fragrance aisle of almost any department store today, right next to whatever's trending this month. Taboo and Jean Naté turn up in ordinary drugstores for under $20. 4,711 ships from almost anywhere online. None of it requires a collector, an auction, or paying someone else to track down an empty bottle for sentiment alone. It's been hiding in plain sight this whole time, mostly because nobody thought to point at it. Girls, grab a pen for this part, because I want you writing names down, not just nodding along. If your mother wore Shalimar, the original is gone, but the current formula is still the closest thing in any store to what she actually wore. If she wore Evening in Paris, you're not buying that bottle back. You're chasing that same powdery, floral feeling. And 4711 or Jean Naté will get you closer to it than anything else sitting on a shelf today. None of this is about building a collection. Nobody needs 8 bottles crowding a dresser. This is about one bottle, found again, close enough that when you finally open it, you're not discovering something new. You're remembering something you already knew. There's a bottle on someone's dresser right now that's never been swapped out. Not once, not for any trend, not for anything on this list. 40 years, same glass, same name. You already know which one I mean, because it's probably yours. My mother was right about that bottle. She was right about all of them. This one's worth keeping, girls. The bottle and the woman who chose it. If you're one of mine, subscribed, the guide already saved, a comment below telling me which bottle was hers, you already know exactly what this channel is for. Right now, there are women in that comment section answering each other, helping total strangers track down a scent they thought was gone for good. The guide holds every name we covered today, the year each one changed, and exactly where to find what's left of it, for less than you'd spend replacing one bottle of that $80 stuff that never worked anyway. And if your daughter isn't sitting here with you tonight, send her this. That's how something like this stays ours.